When most agencies and B2B service companies try outbound, they are usually using a broken playbook that we believe is becoming less and less effective for everybody, but especially agency and B2B service companies. Here's what that tends to look like. This playbook is obsessed with identifying and finding buyers and buyers alone. And then what happens is the copy and the content that's being sent to these people is putting them into this binary of either, yes, I'll enter your sales process and entertain buying from you right now, or I'll tell you to go away, or worse, click the spam button, which destroys deliverability and makes everything else fail. So that's the first issue with this. This isn't always the case, but often with this model, it's based on an SDR or some other junior salesperson that can't really engage in teaching or consulting or running a consultative process. A lot of the times, this playbook is built for software companies and others that have a very different product. It tends to be much more transactional, and it's a product-led sale. There are different dynamics for agencies and B2B service companies that I'm going to talk about more very shortly. With this broken playbook, this is also typically where we see that spray and pray approach, where there's thousands of people contacted weekly. This is problematic for most specialized agencies and B2B service companies because there aren't that many companies in their total addressable market mostly. So contacting thousands is A, not possible, and B, very risky, right? Because of reputations and because it's going to take time to get that message right, to get into the right doors with the right people. This is an approach that is also based on mostly cold outreach and then increasingly with AI, fake personalization, which is basically like saying, hey, here's this thing that I know about you. I'm going to regurgitate it back to you. Personalization can be useful, but this is over leveraging it in a way that doesn't seem organic or real. And it usually doesn't work. And again, it creates this negative cycle because people press the manual spam button, everything goes to spam or the promotions folder, open rates go down, and then you're left saying what's going on. So in a second, we're going to talk about a better methodology for avoiding that. Another thing that's really important to point out is the typical playbook is built on a complicated tech stack. It involves multiple channels right out of the gate, like LinkedIn, email, phone, SMS, all sorts of other things. And it's not to say there isn't value to adding more channels at certain times that can be useful. But the issue is 99% of our clients have tiny sales teams. Sometimes it's just the owner. Even in bigger agencies, it's typically one salesperson who is doing other things. So all this stuff, all these tactics can be useful, but only if you have the human capital, the resources, the mental bandwidth to juggle them, right? So it needs to be a process that's manageable for a small team and that is kind of getting the most bang for the buck based on relatively few people involved in the process. And then the biggest issue is that this playbook assumes that the missing piece of the puzzle, that the gap that needs to be climbed is an awareness gap. If only these people knew about how great we were, if only they saw our case studies, if only they knew how we thought about things, then they would be willing to talk to us and do business with us. Yes, that stuff matters. They're going to need to go through that. The question is when. And at the top of the funnel, when you're reaching out to them for the first time, awareness is not the missing piece. And in a second, we are going to talk about what that missing piece actually is. So to do that, we are going to go back to the 1960s. There was this copywriter who was really brilliant. He worked for one of the big agencies and he wrote this kind of obscure copywriting book. It's definitely an advanced book and it's kind of hard to find. It's called Breakthrough Advertising, and that copywriter was named Eugene Schwartz. And what he observed is that there's 5 stages of market sophistication. I'm going to talk about the first 4. So the first stage is unaware. I almost think about this as when the car was introduced for the first time, or Facebook. It's the classic, if people asked what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. People just don't know that this even exists or that this particular problem could even be solved. So that's the unaware phase. Essentially, like you could never run, let's say, Google search ads for it because nobody even knows it exists. Stage 2 is problem aware, and this is basically when there start to be more competitors entering the market, and the copy tends to get longer. Stage 3 is solution aware. So this is when there are competing solutions, and it's really about the mechanism of action. An example of this that I think Eugene brings up is Schlitz beer in, I think, the early 20th century. Basically, were the first beer brewer to describe the process of brewing beer in their advertising. They said, we get the hops, we do this, we do that. And it was the same process that every brewer was using. They were just the first to describe it. And that created this mechanism of action that became appealing to people. So the theme is that the copy and the explanations tend to get longer as we go through this. Stage 4 is product aware. I think an example of this would be like Uber and Lyft. People understand the problem, they understand the solutions, and they understand what those actual providers are. And it's really kind of this all-out battle for market share. So Uber and Lyft is an example of that. Now, there might be situations where you have different buyers in different stages depending on who you're selling to. If you're selling, website services to old school manufacturers, they could be at an earlier stage than if you're selling websites to tech startups. But overall, by and large, what we tend to see from doing this for a long time is that most prospects for agency services are in stage 5. And that is the most aware stage. At the most aware stage, buyers tend to be more skeptical. When it comes to agency services, for example, chances are they have worked with multiple agencies. They might have had negative experiences. They have, while they may not be complete experts on your area of expertise, they generally know what's going on. And the thing that makes selling agency and B2B service companies different than, let's say, selling a tech product, like a SaaS product, for example, is that people don't get to enjoy the benefits of what you do until weeks or even months after you've delivered. It's not like a SaaS product that you just get to take a demo of and then you get to immediately start getting value from. So back to the earlier question, what is that gap we have to get over when we are doing outreach to people that are mostly in stage 5? And that gap is lack of trust. And we experienced this trust gap firsthand, and we've seen it get worse over time. So again, we've worked with 110 plus agencies. We've seen a lot of these changes over the years. And a few years ago, we were doing a playbook that was more like the traditional one that we believe to now be broken, right? We were working with an agency that was perfectly positioned. They were well specialized to the tech industry. They worked with just about every blue chip tech company under the sun. They were based in the SF Bay Area. One of the owners wanted to retire, and they were looking to get acquired in the next few years. But their issue was, like most agencies, most of the business was reactive and it came from referrals. So they knew they needed to figure out a more scalable channel. So we started working with them and we tried everything under the sun to get meetings, right? We were sending case studies. We were using mass email, LinkedIn. I think we might have used phone at some point. Tried every variant, every A/B test, every permutation. And it was really a very low meeting rate. It was crickets, and we knew we were probably going to get fired if we didn't change things up, right? So at one point, we decided to do an experiment. We decided to do something a little bit out of left field. So instead of doing the classic sales and marketing playbook where we said, hey, here's how great we are, here's how to make you more aware of how great we are, do you want to buy from us, all that lengthy stuff, what we did is we said, all right, we're going to do some data mining. We're going to find all of your prospects that used to work at one of your biggest clients and have now gone on to another company that you could do business with. I don't remember the names of those companies. Let's say we found everybody at HP, and then we went on to find a variety of different companies that people had moved on to, like maybe Symantec or whatever. So we said, hey, I saw you used to work at HP. We've done a lot of work with them over the years. Hope all is well at Symantec. Was hoping to run an idea by you. Something to that effect. And then from that, we got probably over a dozen meetings in the high level areas. This is probably like VP and above, C-level. And a couple of them went on to close for major six-figure engagements. And then that agency went on to get acquired. So that planted a seed in a pretty dramatic way, right? And we said, this is interesting. This had nothing to do with traditional sales and marketing copy. It had nothing to do with just mass spray and pray, although we were doing it at relative scale. We were probably contacting, a few hundred or maybe the low thousands of people, over the course of a few weeks. But it really worked. And then we started expanding out this concept. And now it's all we do. We developed it into a methodology that I've since published a book by the same name called Relationship Sales at Scale. It's all about how to find your virtual tribes and reliably grow your agency or professional service business. So again, here's the broken playbook. Finding and converting buyers. Salesperson often can't offer value. Contact thousands, spray and pray. Cold outreach based personalization, basically AI personalization now, which looks fake. Complicated tech stack that a small team can't manage, and it assumes awareness is the missing ingredient. So here's how we're doing things differently. One, we are looking to build relationships with prospects, not just find buyers and look for these needles in a haystack. Another thing is we're usually running this for somebody that can offer value. It does not have to be an owner, but it should be somebody that can offer value, teach, and consult on that first conversation. Instead of contacting thousands weekly, we're contacting hundreds, both because our clients need to be well specialized and they need to, basically have enough of a niche, or even if they're not niched yet, they're in that process and they can use Outbound to hone that even more. Instead of cold outreach, although we do have to do that sometimes, we're trying to do as much commonality-driven outreach as possible, which is something that I'll talk about in a second. Instead of a complicated tech stack, we are starting with a single channel, and in most cases, this is email. So one question that often comes up is, what channel do we use? Do we use LinkedIn? Do we use email? Do we use phone? Do we use passenger pigeon? All of the channels have their own pros and cons, right? And I think they do matter. But there's a few things that work. The first is, again, we don't want to have too many at once. We really want to start with one so that it's something that a small team can manage. You can start out with a whole bunch, get overwhelmed, then the whole thing falls apart. There's a few advantages to email. The first is that it can scale much more easily. The second is you can have much more control over it. It's not a channel anybody owns. It's really just a protocol. So versus a LinkedIn, there's lots of rules. You're not even supposed to technically have somebody else in your account. And I think the third and most important reason is that it's still where we go to make plans and do business. Versus a LinkedIn can be very effective. There's nothing wrong with LinkedIn, but it has more distractions going on. So often it's harder to convert people to the meeting. So again, all the channels have their own pros and cons. We're not married to email, but we often like to start here. And the most important difference from the usual playbook is, instead of assuming that awareness is the missing ingredient, we assume that trust is the missing ingredient. And that informs everything we do with this relationship sales and scale approach. So next you might be wondering, okay, how does this actually play out? And to answer that question, I want to drill down to point 4, which is commonality-driven outreach. So again, most people are doing massive cold outreach. Sometimes they'll try to personalize it, which is basically just regurgitating information back at somebody. Hey, Bob, I saw you worked at Acme and you like to go to watch football on the weekends. It's not really that compelling. The thing that is actually compelling and actually builds trust, because it indicates that somebody is in your tribe, is being able to connect with those people that share certain commonalities, even if those commonalities might feel very light. In a second, I'm going to give some examples of this, but to talk about why we believe this works, we are going to base this on the work of sociologist Robin Dunbar, who you might know from the concept of Dunbar's number. Here's what that looks like. So here's you. You have a circle of 5, right? This might be your very closest family or friends. From there, you have a bigger circle of 15. These are generally very close friends, people you continue to confide in. This tends to expand out by triples. From there, you have 150 casual friends. These are the people you might invite to a wedding or some once in a lifetime event. From there, you have about 500 acquaintances. These are people that you would talk to on the street. Hey, I haven't seen you in a while, sort of thing. Next, you have 1,500 familiars. This is essentially what's referred to as Dunbar's number. These are the people whose face you could put to a name. And then our experience has been there are thousands of other people that we refer to as lukewarms, who are those that would be willing to talk to you based on a compelling business and or personal commonality.